Some numbers are just so huge they don't even feel real. They feel kind of like a joke, something you'd see in a cartoon. But the number we're going to dig into today is very, very real, and it leads to a truly massive question about how our economy actually works.
So, you probably remember that classic Simpsons episode, right? The one where Mr. Burns gets that trillion-dollar bill? Back when that aired in 1998, the whole idea was just completely absurd. It was the punchline. But what's wild is that the source material we're looking at today shows how, just a quarter-century later, that joke is now our shocking reality.
Okay, here it is, $1,040 billion. According to the Federal Reserve, that's how much the U.S. paid in interest on its national debt, just in 2023. And let's be super clear, that's not paying down the debt. Nope, that is just the interest payment for one single year.
So yeah, that massive number, it isn't just some boring line item on a budget. It's a huge flashing red light, a symptom of something much, much deeper going on in our monetary system. This really is a trillion-dollar question, and we're going to unpack it. To really wrap your head around how massive that is, get this. For decades, the military budget has been the biggest chunk of federal spending. But in 2023, the interest payment on the debt actually surpassed the entire military budget. Yeah, you heard that right.
And that's where we get to the real head-scratcher. When the government spends money on the military, you get stuff, right? You get tanks, you get planes, you get salaries for soldiers, you get something tangible. But when we spend over $1 trillion on interest, what do we get? What's the return on that investment? Seriously, what are we buying?
To even begin to answer that, we have to go back to basics. Like, where does money actually come from? Because it's not as simple as you might think. And honestly, our whole problem might have started when we kind of forgot a major lesson from our own history. Okay, picture this. It's the Civil War. Lincoln's government desperately needs money, but the big banks are demanding insane interest rates. We're talking as high as 36%. So Lincoln did something brilliant. The government just issued its own currency, directly and completely interest-free. They were called greenbacks. It was money created by the government for the public good without adding a dime to the national debt. But that is not how our system works today. Not even close. This chart tells the story. Only about 5% of our money is what you'd call base money, the cash and coins created by the government. The other 95%? That's created out of thin air by private commercial banks every single time they make a loan. The vast majority of our money is literally borrowed into existence as interest-bearing debt. Okay, so if almost all of our money is just debt from private banks, what does that mean for things like taxes and inflation? Well, before we can even talk about a fix, the source material argues we have to bust a couple of really common myths.
Myth number 1. The government needs your tax money to be able to spend anything. Sounds logical, but it's not the full picture. See, for a government that issues its own currency, taxes are more like powerful tools for steering the economy. As you can see here, they're used to stabilize the dollar's value, or tackle inequality, guide industries with tariffs, or even influence our behavior, like with cigarette taxes. Their main job isn't just to fill up a piggy bank.
And here's myth number 2. Inflation is simple. It's just printing too much money, right? Well, it's way more complicated than that. It's often a chain reaction. It might start with a supply shortage, which pushes up business costs, which then get passed on to you, maybe with a little extra profit tacked on. The classic too much money chasing too few goods part, that's often the last domino to fall, not the first. All right, so with those myths out of the way, we can start to piece together a potential solution. And it really all boils down to answering 3 pretty simple foundational questions about money. First question, as the economy grows, more people, more products, more services, should the amount of money in circulation increase? Well, if we were still using the same amount of money as we had back in 1835, that would work out to about 30 cents per person today. A total disaster. So yeah, the answer is pretty clearly B. A growing economy needs more money. Okay, question 2. If we agree we need new money, who should be in charge of making it? Should we stick with the current system where private banks create it as debt that we all have to pay interest on? Or should the government create it interest-free, just like those Civil War greenbacks? That $1 trillion interest payment we talked about, it kind of makes a powerful argument for option B, doesn't it?
And that leads to the final crucial question. How should this new, debt-free money get into the economy? Should the government give it to specific corporations or big projects, basically picking winners and losers? The problem there is something called the Cantillon effect.
Whoever gets the new money first gets to spend it before it makes prices rise for everyone else. Doesn't seem very fair. Or should it be distributed equally to every citizen?
And if you answered B to all three of those questions, you land right here, at this proposed solution. The U.S. Treasury could create debt-free sovereign money. Think of them as digital greenbacks, and distribute that new money directly and equally to every single citizen as an unconditional basic income, or UBI. This way, everyone benefits from the growth of the economy, not just those closest to the banks.
Now, I know what you might be thinking. That sounds pretty radical. But when you look at it through the lens of American history, it starts to look less like a revolution and more like the next logical step in a recurring pattern.
The source material calls this the Phoenix cycle. The idea is that roughly every 80 years, America faces systemic bugs that force a major upgrade. In the 1780s, the bug was an unresponsive government. In the 1860s, it was slavery. In the 1930s, it was massive wealth inequality. The theory suggests we're due for the next one, America 4.0, an upgrade to tackle pieces of all three of those old problems.
So what's the common thread here? What connects all these massive society-changing upgrades? Believe it or not, every single one of them involved the fundamental overhaul of the nation's money and banking system. It has always been at the absolute core of America's reinvention. And that really brings us full circle. The way our money is created isn't some law of nature. It's a series of policy choices we've made over time. So we're left with this question to chew on. If it is a choice, and if we really are at another one of these historic turning points, what kind of system do we want to build? And what kind of economic legacy do we want to choose for the future?